Discover Help presents Stress-Free Living with Ray Samich and Mr. Stress-Free, Ratanjit S. Sandhi. This audio program is an unscripted and unrehearsed conversation between Ray and Ratanjit. It is shared with you in hope of adding value to your life. We encourage you to listen to this program in its entirety to receive the full impact of its message. Sit back, relax, open your heart, mind, and soul to this edition of Stress-Free Living.
Welcome to Stress-Free Living. Thank you so much for being with us. I'm Ray Samich, and I'd like to introduce all of you to my dear friend, radio colleague, co-host of our show, and my spiritual brother, Ratanjit Sandhi. Ratanjit, how are you today?
Wonderful, Ray. How are you?
Excellent, thank you. So glad to be with you and with all of our wonderful Zoom guests that we have a chance to interact with during our show. If you would like to be a part of that conversation and that really special group, please do visit our Stress-Free Living Radio channel on YouTube. Just kind of do a search on that, Stress-Free Living Radio, and it'll get you a link. It'll also get you over 100 different shows that we have recorded, maybe for your own insight or to reduce your own stress, or maybe to share with a loved one. Ratanjit, this is a very near and dear topic to me this week. I'm very, relationships are very important to me. And in the last 8-day window, I have had two 30-plus year friends that have passed away, and totally distinct from each other, but just the timing is so crazy that within such a short window, I've lost them. And so it's caused me to think about a little different perspective on a question. I'm not asking what happens after we die, because we've had conversations on that, and maybe we should have another one. I'm not even asking why we die. I'm asking, why were we born to die? Why were we, in the infinite wisdom of the Creator, who created such an amazing world around us with everything that works in complete precision with all the other aspects of the world, why were we chosen to live this specific number of years? Why were we designed to be born and then to live for currently the 80-year average? It used to be lower, but still relative to time, it's a short window. What is the wisdom of that? What is the purpose of being born, aging, becoming a little more unempowered in our later years, a little more feeble, a little physically affected, emotionally, mentally affected, dying at 80 or 90, and then it's over? What is there a wisdom, ultimate wisdom to that whole process? Or why weren't we allowed to live for 400 years? Or why weren't we allowed to live forever? What is your take on that whole thing?
There are many aspects of it. If we take from the worldly sense, common sense, so if we live forever, this world would be very crowded. And right now, with all these people, 8 billion people, you haven't gone to India. So when Bill Clinton, first time he went to India, and when he came back, he started to go to church more often. And his close friend, he says, "Hey, Bill, what happened to you? Are you becoming soft, or you are coming to church more often?" So he pulled him aside. He says, "There is God." "So what do you mean?" So there is no other way to explain how India works. There has to be a God. Because the cows are on the same road, trucks and rickshaw and cycle are on the same road. And, it's this. So, as sense, we are so crowded.
Yeah.
Our quality of life would
I
be
agree. We can't all live forever. I'm not thinking that we could live forever. I kind of said that out of humorous, but why was 80, the current 80 years, why was that chosen? Do you think that's
not
like,
really. If you go back to about 100 years or 50 years or 100 years, and lifespan was shorter,
you're right,
and people would die. A person who is 50 years was considered to be old man,
right?
and now you're 80, or pretty soon it'll be 100, pretty soon it'll be 110 and 115 or 120. The more we understand how the aging process works, we can extend it. But ultimately, aging, uh, there is technology which can prolong your aging, and ultimately, it makes sense. So, supposing you go to a different place, if you migrated, or if you are visiting Europe, you are visiting Paris, and you are a visitor, and your home is here in Cleveland. So after 2 weeks or 10 weeks or 2 months or 4 months, or eventually you are going to come home, right?
Yes,
Because, and similarly, we have to, our whole, this question arises from the absence of self knowledge, absence of knowing who we are. If we knew who we are, then this question is very easy to comprehend and understand. In our life, we have uh, relatives. We call them, he's my blood relative. And then you have friends. Many times, friends are more dear to you than your relatives. And what is the closest person in your life? Is your spouse, who has no blood relationship. Its relationship is based on love.
right.
There is another relationship which we do not comprehend, and that relationship is based on your who you are. And the same, once you comprehend that relationship, then everybody on earth is your relative. Everybody on earth is the person you know, is a part of you. You are same. So this question, uh, you have to understand the psychology of our Creator, the divine wisdom which has created the human beings. So before we go into that, I said a little bit, and you have some questions or comments.
Well, I mean, there's so many different ways that we can go on this topic. There's so many thoughts that I have in terms of, do we want to live longer? The relationships that we have that are part of our life. I was another thing that influenced this topic in my mind was that I was with somebody whose grandfather had just passed, and he was way up in his 90s. He lived a very long life, and I knew this man from the advertising radio business that I was in, and at one point he was Mr. Popularity. He always was surrounded by his big circle of friends, and if you wanted to go to lunch with him or breakfast with him, you had to wait weeks to get on his schedule because he was just that popular. And this many years ago, and he just passed away. And I was talking to the grandson, and the grandson told me that there was no calling hours, there was no funeral there was a funeral service. He was Jewish, but there was no visitations at all, not even what they do traditionally in that culture. And he says because every one of his family had died. Every one of his friends had long passed. And he says there was nobody there. Even all of his children had died because he had outlived all of his children. So that also kind of put another perspective into it, because it would have to work for everybody, right? I mean, if suddenly the whole system was changed, it would have to change for all those relationships that you alluded to before also to be there. If if I'm greedy and say I want to live 200 years, but everybody that I knew and had relationships with as I was growing up and doing everything in my life, and those people were long past, would I want to still be there? Would I want to outlive my grandchildren or my great grandchildren? I mean, that's a horrific thought, to watch them all pass. So, you know, I know there's wisdom in the entire scheme of things. I understand that there's a plan. I understand, like you said, that we all can't live forever because there wouldn't be room for everybody. But why was it chosen just this way? Why was it a life? Is there a certain wisdom that we're supposed to be gaining in life? There's a lot of jokes kind of out there that says you spend your first 10 years doing this and next 10 years this way and next 10 years this way. It's a lot of different, you know, humorous, somewhat meaningful thoughts that are put out there. Is there really that kind of wisdom to it? Is there really a divine plan that says this is the best way to live your life in the allotted time that our Creator has given us?
So fundamentally, Ray, we mention on this show many times, or uh, people who have listened to us continuously would know, we talk about the three elements of our human experience. One is this human body, one is this brain, and one is the force, enlivening force, the life in us. The
Mhm.
enlivening force is the real us, because the human body is basically created from the element of this earth. And this will merge in the element of this earth once we go. So the divine power sends us in this on this earth and gives us this human body to operate as a space suit which is visible, which can speak, and which can have a feeling and all those things. So it gives us an experience of our existence. And so we are sent here on this earth as in this human body mode. And ultimately, when this space suit has aging, and eventually it becomes uh, old, and it becomes, we call it a death, or it dies. But we go back to merge with our divine power. So we basically are here for a very limited time. So now, why are we here? Are we here to get higher education and get a degree and be successful, build a big home and have a family and all these things? Or are we here to do all this charitable work, or are those things? So to understand this, we have to see the universal wisdom which has created us and created the whole universe. We have to see a life, a universal force, enlivening force present in a thing which is alive but does not have the brain, does not have the ego, doesn't have, so that is our plants, or trees, or those things. They are alive. They So what happens to a tree when you plant a seed? It grows into a small plant, and eventually it goes through all kinds of pain and suffering of weather, cold and warm, and eventually becomes a tree and bears fruit. But this wisdom basically is given to that plant to produce the fruit, but not to hold on to the fruit. It doesn't eat its own fruit. Apple tree doesn't eat its own apple. And it unconditionally hands over to whoever comes in, whether it's a squirrel or whether this is a criminal who passes by, and the taste of that fruit doesn't change, or the fragrance of a flower doesn't change. So they continuously, every season, summer and they shed the leaves in winter, and they again spring they get back into the full bloom, and so they go through the cycle. But what they do is continuously give their success to this world. So in human species, we are created very sophisticatedly. We are given a brain, we are given creativity, we are given understanding, we are given all these things. And by all these things, we are supposed to add much higher value than a tree or a fruit tree or a plant can add. So what happens is that our brain, our computer, which is attached to us, which can give us creativity and amazing capability to add value, is attached to this aging human body. So human body forever wants to remain alive. So this question, why am I dying, is all based coming out of the human body mode. And human body is fear-filled, greed-filled, insecurity-filled, and ego-filled. It is thinking itself to be separate. It is separate. We are one when we consider ourselves to be the force which enlivens us. We are separate when we think of this human body. Each human body is separate. We have a separate fingerprint. We have separate structure. We have separate habits. So this human body is very uniquely created to you uniquely able to add the higher value. But once we understand, once our power which enlivens us begin to operate our brain, we go into unconditional value adding mode, free of our ego and fear and greed. And then we comprehend the wisdom of short life. So in this cycle of short life, we are starting a project and leaving the project to be continued by the next generation. That project is embedded in making this world a better place to live. So this process continues, right?
All right. So I want to I definitely want to come back to what you ended with there, with leaving things for the next generation, because maybe that's the whole core of this. But I want to, before we do, I want to go back to the idea of the plants, and I really love to break down and think about our own life cycle in terms of nature, because you're right. When once we bring our mind into it and our fear, our knowledge that we are dying, our knowledge that we're not going to be the physical specimen and probably the mental specimen in 20 years that we are today, and that's just the way the life cycle works, so that when we are 90, we're not going to be able to do what we did when we were 40. So I like to think of it leaving out the knowledge, the brain, the emotions, the
You
realities.
can't leave out the brain. Brain is our main component.
No,
But
but I
who
mean,
runs the brain? Who runs the brain? Is the human
but I
body
mean,
running
even
the brain?
I'm sorry, even in terms though of just understanding nature's plan is what I'm referring to. Is that if we look at that plant, and I know you've given this example before, but it's so powerful. When you look at the rose bush or when you look at the apple tree and you see the cycle of life and productivity and adding value that comes from that, that doesn't have the brain, to your point that you had said earlier. There's no brain involved in there. It's purely operating, functioning the way nature designed it to do.
Yes.
And so you see that, and you see that how does that fruit come? It comes not from even within itself, because it cannot produce that fruit unless it's pollinated. Okay, the rose bush can't have that bud unless it's pollinated. So and unless it gets the rain from nature, unless it gets the right temperatures from nature, it can, a rose bush is the only way you can get a rose, but it can't function without nature around it providing just what it needs to produce the roses, just what an apple tree needs to produce the apples. So it has every bit of power within it, but that power is dead. It's deactivated unless it's part of nature's plan, unless that bee comes to pollinate that flower, unless the rain falls from the skies to give it the nutrition that it needs. So I really, I don't think most of us stop and think about that element. And it is so, there's so much wisdom and understanding that that is the plan. Even that apple tree has a life. I mean, it's going to, like you said, in its early days as a seedling, it doesn't bear fruit. And then it goes through its best years. And one of the homes that I had bought when I was younger, had all of these trees that had been planted about 30 years earlier by the owner. And at one point, it was an incredible orchard. And yet, by the time that we bought the home, they were all at their last years. So we'd only get a few plums and a few peaches and a few pears off these trees because their window in their cycle of most productivity was already passed. So you even see there in nature, there's a plan, there's a cycle of life that is there, and then that tree doesn't have the value anymore and you have to plant new ones. So I know there's a lot of wisdom there that I just wanted to call out again from what you had spoken, to make sure that I grasp it fully by restating it, and maybe our listeners grasp it a little bit more to understand. In Florida, you would think that a lot of flowers will bloom all year because the weather is so much warmer, but in fact, even there's still a seasonality, even when winter cold isn't a factor. Certainly, we don't get blooms in winter in the north in the cold temperatures, but you don't even get it always in the south. Everything does have an ebb and a flow, a nature's plan to the cycle of life. And And if we don't have the brain that interferes with understanding that and influencing it, I think it's a really good place to start with this conversation. So I thank you for sharing that. When we come back, I want to move on to the part that you ended with, though, Ratanjit. The idea that, are we designed only to move things further to the finish line, Are we really not designed to finish the race, but we're designed to do our part of running that race and then leaving it for the next generation? I think that's a really interesting place to go to. So we'll come back with that, or maybe not, because we're going to now interact with our wonderful Zoom guests and get their input on it. And we'll be back with you. This is Stress Free Living. Please stay with us. Okay, everybody, it's your turn. Any thoughts?
I do. So, I think the questions would be started at a different point, not that why we die, but before we die, we're here. So the questions would be why we are here, and then only we can understand why we die. And so not only why we're here, but how we are here. So without answering those two questions, we can never answer the question why we die. So I have my ideas, but I'll like to hear from other people.
Thank you. Yes. Anyone else? We still have a minute.
Yeah, I agree what he said, and also because taking the example of plants, there are some plants which are maybe only last for 2-3 months or 4 months, and they produce and go. There are some plants which go ahead for years. So the purpose of life is also important, as earlier said. And second, also the plants have brain. We cannot say that they don't have brain. They have brain, and their brain is a distributed brain type, already proved. So we can talk later on that. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have a quick thought or question you would like me to ask Ratanjit? Neat. All right, thank you for your participation. We're going to come back in a moment. Ratanjit, I'm sorry I cut you off there. I didn't mean to do that. I wasn't being clear on what I was trying to say. We're back on Stress Free Living. Thank you so much for joining us. And we are talking today about the cycle of life and the limited time that we have. And of course, if we were given 100 years, we would probably want 200. And if we were given 500 years on this earth, we probably would want 1,000. But doesn't 80 seem short? It really, to me, it does. Maybe it wouldn't have when I was 10, but as we get older, we look around us, and especially as we lose some loved ones at that time of our life when they start to pass away, we say, why was it meant to be such a short period of time? And that's what we're talking about here today. Ratanjit, we've covered this nature part. One of our guests says there is kind of a brain going on in the plants, and it's not a human brain. And I think the difference, I believe, when you said it didn't have a brain, is that it doesn't have a brain that says fear and ego drive me, and greed. They don't drive those. There's a brain in as much as it knows what it's supposed to do and it fulfills its purpose, but it isn't influenced by our different personal needs and personal desires. Is that a fair explanation of the difference of a natural brain versus a human brain?
Yeah, basically, as a plant, they basically are destined to do certain things. That's basically their so-called, it's not, you can call it a brain, but it's a different kind of a mechanism which is
Right.
allowing them to grow and help formulate the temperature and the oxygen and those things so that it's allowed them to produce the fruit. So
Right.
ultimately, the brain power which we have is basically make us selfish. And sometimes what we produce, we are creating. Each human being are designed very differently, and we are each has different interests and different capabilities and different understanding. So once this human body basically runs the brain, they is basically focuses entire creation by the brain into fear, greed, ego, and those kind of things. So once your power within you, when it starts to control the brain, because that power knows what is the purpose of being here. Power is not scared because it doesn't die. Power doesn't think itself to be separate. It is part of the bigger power, that there is no ego. So ultimately, it focuses on basically adding higher value. And another thing which happens is that right now, when we are thinking in the human body mode, I have relatives. I consider, oh, this is coming my blood relationship with, or this person has helped me. He has become, or she has become my friend, or somebody in my race. I have to understand this is, I have to support my race, I have to support my gender, I have to support my nationality. So you see people all basically contaminated by the relationship which the human body tells you they are. But there is another relationship that each one of us have, which is the relationship because of the power which is enlivening you. Once you see the power within the other person, so basically, when I'm adding value, I'm basically serving that power present around me, within me. So then I would not be unkind to environment. I would not be unkind to plant. I would not be unkind to human. I would not be unkind to animals because I see the power, that presence of the power in everything. So all my concentration, all my attention, all my intelligence, learning, and capabilities are going to be focused on serving that power. And serving that power means I'm adding the higher value to everyone, not subtracting. And basically, I see everyone the same eyes when I see my daughter or my uncle or my father, because right now they are related to me. Once I see a real relationship, because when I see the divine force present in them, and I see that force which is relating to me, I have much higher respect and kindness and care for everyone rather than just a limited few. So it you don't feel lonely, you don't feel segregated. You basically focus on adding value and serving, and basically you follow the path what you are designed to do, what you are sent here to do, right?
You know what's interesting, Ratanjit, is if you think about what was the initial reason why you made a relationship, why that started. how that started, in school or in business or through a friend of a friend, you met somebody and you started the relationship. Fast forward and you realize how incredibly strong that relationship has become and how much you mean to each other. But if we had the attitude, like you just said, that we we are designed to interact with everybody because we were all part of the same one. So whatever was the fluke that brought two people together that became friends or became husband or wife or whatever it is that started a relationship, if we just looked at the opportunity that everybody is our brother and sister, everybody is divinely connected to each other, could we have that same intense relationship theoretically with everybody? I mean, if we opened our minds and our hearts to say that everybody could be a tremendous friend, everybody could be, if we gave them the chance to open up about themselves and tell us who they are, and if we had the chance to build that same type of a close relationship with everybody, because we weren't relying on a fluke meeting at some point, we just were open-minded that everybody is the same as us, could we have literally millions of tight relationships with everybody?
So anytime when you meet a stranger, when you begin to see the divine force in them, you have a tendency to serve them. You have a tendency to be kind, a tendency to be respectful, tendency to listen, to understand them. So basically, you become a material to be friendly with. Friendship is, you cannot have friends, you can only be a friend. So in that understanding, when you are adding value to a stranger, that stranger becomes your friend. So friendship is not about we are introduced or somebody has done. Friendship is, the seed of friendship is based on the unconditional service. When you provide that unconditional service, you become friend. And the whole world, you do not live in a strange world. You live amongst friends. You are never lonely. You are always amongst people who recognize you as a value adding entity, and they have reciprocal respect for you. Doesn't matter if that person is of wrong party, wrong nationality, wrong religion, wrong whatever it is. But ultimately, a lot of people, in my case, I wear a turban. So I am the most strange looking animal in the whole universe. And people, I was sitting at the airport traveling, and suddenly there was a lady sitting there, and I brought a cup of coffee for me. I thought, there's another person who is sitting, older lady. I brought another coffee for her. I suddenly became a very, very friend, very close associates. He started sharing the wisdom. Our loneliness disappeared. So
Right.
it is
Right.
all up to us.
That's a whole nother topic for another show, but I'd like to explore that with you because it makes us wonder. We think there's a spark that starts a relationship, a friendship, a love affair, whatever it is. We think there's some kind of a magical spark that happens. I wonder how much of that spark is based on our fear and our greed, our desire to be accepted, our desire to feel special. And if we didn't have that going on, would we be able to have amazing relationships with thousands of people instead of our close circle of friends? And that's another discussion for another day, but you've kind of brought that to the surface. We need to take a break here. I want to take a break. I promised to come back with what you had said in the earlier segment about the intended evolution of our life. A fruit tree basically produces the same way today that it did hundreds of years ago. Now there's some science going on that they try to put different things in there and shoot up, chemicals and things and make some changes so that they're more productive. They give us more apples and they're better tasting apples, or they're whatever it is. But basically, if it wasn't affected by human science intervening, a fruit tree today is the same as it was 1,000 years ago. It gives its life, its purpose is to bear fruit, and it does it for a short window and then it dies. It doesn't hand off to the next generation. It doesn't advance an idea, a mission, a project to this degree and then hand it off to the next generation. Is that the difference we're going to come back with? Is that the difference between our human purpose and the nature's purpose that is associated with plants and trees and animals, that we're supposed to be evolving in a continuous positive motion for all of humankind? We're going to come back with that on Stress Free Living. We'll be back in just a moment. Please stay with us. All right, everybody, if you've got a thought or a question to ask.
We didn't answer.
Plants also have a message. They hand over the baton because the wheat plant will produce seed for the next season of.
Yeah. True.
Okay, from season to season, yeah.
We didn't
Anybody else?
Rakesh's question.
Yes, yeah. Well, I was going to add another question is that, do we really die? Okay, so that's where the Eastern and Western philosophies are totally at odds, and that's something that should be explored, because obviously I've lived here a larger part of my life now, in America, and so I do study a lot of Eastern philosophies, and I try to keep up with my knowledge of Western philosophies too, and most of my friends are Americans. So there's something to be learned, and I think that there is a hesitation in bringing that topic up, that if we talk about Eastern philosophies, we will be labeled as homers, so to speak. And humanity is one. I don't think we should be constrained by those kinds of limitations in our thinking. I think we are the best when we learn from all cultures. And I think it should be talked about out in the open. And this is a vast topic. And the other issue is the concept.
Okay, Rakesh, I have to cut you off because we're going back. I want to respond to. Let's do a show on why do we die, reincarnation. We have no problem to stay away from that. We can talk about that maybe next week. But that isn't the topic today that we're on. Today we're talking about the life, not the afterlife. So I just want to let you know. We're back on Stress Free Living. Thank you so much for joining us. Love our conversations that we have with our amazing Zoom guests in between, and we will continue that without limitation right after the show is over. We sometimes stick around for a half hour or an hour with a show after the show. So if you'd like to be a part of that, we encourage that you do. You can check out our link to be a part of that at our Stress Free Living radio channel link on our YouTube station. Ratanjit, limited time here left. So much input and feedback, so many things that we could talk about. But I think this was one of the really important things that you mentioned earlier, is handing off our where we leave it. Okay, thinking like handing a baton to a race where you have four runners instead of just one. You don't have one person responsible to take you from the front to from the beginning to the finish line. It's a plan that you do your part as incredibly good as you possibly can, and then you pass the baton to the next runner and let them do their part. Do you think they're right in that little bit of an example? Is that the way we're supposed to live? We have a short period that we run and we're supposed to give it our absolute all and then pass the baton to the next runner?
You know, in the trees and the vegetations, they always produce a seed. Eventually, there is a seed which germinates again and continue that journey of giving those fruits or flowers to the universe. So they do it only one basic thing that they add. As a human being, our fruit is uh, tremendously creative and different. So we basically are problem solver, because whatever makes this universe or this world better, that's what we start the project. But we do not finish the project. We bring it to a certain level, and the next generation takes it to the next level, and next generation, look at the science. So earlier scientists, they discover something, and today's that it was shared, and those scientists, today's scientists make that as the basis of their further research. They did further, and eventually what we discovered in science, when they're applied, becomes technology. And some, because of what was discovered and what was unveiled, we can add tremendous value. But at the same time, if some of that science is used in the wrong direction to control, I want to be the biggest guy, I want to control the world, and my ego and my fear and my greed directs me. So all the knowledge which I gained compromises the whole human life, whole society. So initially, at the beginning of our journey, we are told that our brain, our character is formulated when we are under 6 years of age. So at that age, if we direct our mind to be guided by the power present within us, it becomes a habit for us to control our mind from the force present in us. So eventually, we will operate our entire human life, majority of the time, free of fear, greed, and ego. But what happens in our society, we enforce fear, greed, and ego in a child. You are a separate being. Your religion is this, you are this. So we segregate them and we tell them, be yourself. Nobody is going to take care of you except you. If you do not worry about you, nobody is going to worry about you. You basically make a human person as a selfish human being. So we segregate them, we give them the character, which is basically all directed by the human body mode. We do not give them, we do not give the habit of operating in a character which is guided by the divine force, which is free of ego, fear, and greed. Right?
I don't disagree at all that that's what we're doing, but you've added another element in there, Ratanjit. You've added an element of self responsibility, and I think the fine line is, do we teach young people that they're responsible for their actions? You're responsible ultimately for your own life, and you can't be you should not be under the misimpression that others are going to give you things and that you're entitled to all kinds of different things to survive. You have to take responsibility for yourself, and the fact that you need to eat and you need to have shelter and you need to have a purpose and income and be able to function and all those kind of things. But then there's that fine line that also says, but you're part of the bigger one, and so you need to be giving back to this bigger one. Do you see the kind of the conundrum that that door opens? Where is the fine? Where does that line cross over that says you're you are not just you're part of the bigger one, but you still have to take responsibility for yourself. You still can't just say, okay, I'm part of the one feed me, one give me a place to live, one give me my life.
Basically, when we focus on just handling everything ourselves, remain an employee. When you bring other people to help you, it becomes a business. It grows much bigger. It can do so many things which you cannot do single handedly. So we are designed to be cooperative. We are designed to work together. Or basically, if we construct a mission, we solve a problem, we invite all different type of people into that vision so that we can work together. We are all one because basically anything you do, you cannot do alone. Because you have to breathe, the oxygen comes in you. You have to have the right temperature, you have to the right food. So those things are done by so many other people. But you basically, when you understand that the whole thing is a cooperative mindset rather than segregated mindset. So once you operate in the cooperative mindset, you operate in close to oneness mindset, and ultimately you achieve things which otherwise are not possible. So ultimately, that understanding has to be given to people. So you are not alone. All the resources of the world are basically yours to use them. But the outcome is not which is captivated by you. The success is not yours because the plant produces fruit, but it never eats it. So our successes are always for the society. Once we understand that, when we make a difference to the people living in the society, when we make their life better, we automatically get rewarded, right?
Sanjit, I think we have to end it there. Some of our Zoom guests here, for our general audience to know, asked about, why are we here? How are we here? Why do we die? What happens after we die? All of those, which are incredibly powerful questions and deep thought questions, and we will come back with those. I think this is such an incredibly powerful topic for those of us who look at life and think about why we're here and all those questions that we ask. So we're going to continue this, not from a negative tone at all, not from a gloom and doom tone, but just to understand how the cycle of life happens for all of us. So we're going to come back and continue these conversations. But today was especially about the time frame that we have. And Ratanjit, I just love what you've come back to at the end with the analogy of handing off, doing as much as we can in our life cycle and then handing it off to the next generation. So it's not like we're done. It's like we did our critically important part in running the race. Thank you so much for sharing that and all the other nuggets of gold that you shared with our audience today. Thank you, Ratanjit. And thank you, everybody, for participating and being part of our show. We look forward to talking with you again real soon. We hope we've added value to your life. Remember, we're all playing the same game. Have a great day. All right.
It's a topic which raises more question than answer.
It does. And for our audience to hear, I don't mean to be tough in that way. I don't mean to be, but I'm wanting to control because this topic could have taken us in so many different ways. And
I know, and you're fine. I don't take it personally. I have a tendency to, talk a bit more than I should. So, you can always stop.
Not at all. No, you're a valuable part of our program, so we want you to add value. I just wanted to, so you understand, we were trying to stay on focus.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Who else would like to have a thought here? Now the floor is yours. I'm going to be quiet.
I
Kim,
feel
your
contribution, I feel less pressure. And when I'm concerned about me, I know that that is my ego that's driving. And when fear is present, love is not. Even if I don't mean to be harsh with others, if I'm driven by fear, I'm afraid and I'm not even thinking about the impact on others. It's just whatever the fear is. So being present to that is really helpful. But I love the comment that Ratanji said, when it's all about me is very limited. But when I think of others, now I have a business, I feel so much joy when I'm contributing to others. Even if I don't have the solution, the fact that I'm engaged and interested in others really opens me up and gives me access to something beautiful. Whereas when I'm concerned about looking good, effectiveness, all of those things where I feel like it's going to shine a negative light on me, I am a miserable person to be around. It's like, we're going on vacation and we're going to have fun. Damn it. It's scheduled for 3:00. Nobody wants to go on vacation with me.
Right. Yeah. And you will enjoy it.
Oh, and joyful, then we can discover together. So I don't know if I'm clearly articulating what's in my heart, but this feels good to have that reminder that it's not about me. Really think about coming from contribution and, the purpose for why I'm here versus worrying about the time that I have here, or even why I was brought here. Just the fact that I'm here is a blessing. And how can I be a blessing to others? It seems like it will just add more blessings to everybody, including me.
Yeah, if you have
Very
a
nice.
business which really makes a difference to the world, you'll find people lining up to work for you. And many times, when I started my business, when I would, before I recruit people, I would not have a one-to-one interview. I will have an open house. So I just invite people and we'll have lunch and we'll have the whole day. And I basically share my vision to them, what we want to do. And at the end of this session, a lot of people will come to me, sir, I want to work for you. I don't care whether you pay me or not. So the power of adding the highest value when it is conveyed, it bypasses all the rules and regulations which we are living with. Right? Sana,
Who else would have?
do you have a comment?
Who were
No,
you asking,
I was
Ratanjit?
just,
Sana?
sorry.
Please go ahead.
No,
I'm
I
sorry.
was just trying to articulate everything which was spoken today. And the best example is of nature, which was spoken over and over again, that all the answers lies in nature. So beautiful, beautiful thoughts. Thank you.
Ray, you had something you wanted to say?
No, I'm good. I've spoken way too much today. I want to hear what everybody else has to say. Who haven't we heard from yet? Jagesh, we haven't
Yes,
heard much
I
today.
would like to add something here. Why are we born here or born to create some purpose or some bigger value in life? So that comes as a meaning to your life when you have lived so many years. I mean, like 50 plus, 60 plus, 70 plus. Then things suddenly it dawns upon you that you have lived so many years but created less, could have created much more meaningful, much more value addition. And then on the other thought is, oh gosh, you have just 20 or 30 years more only to go. So there's a dilemma, like let the life sail through in a boat as God has intended, or you create more challenges for your own self. So the focus has to be on your own self or the people around you or the society in which you are given, that you add value there. So there's a bit of dilemma there.
I just said I was not going to say anything, but here I am. Before we started the show, Ratanjit and I were talking, and I said, everybody kind of figures you're at your peak like at 20 or 30 in terms of your physical abilities and everything. If you were 30 and knew that you had another 100 years to go, because most people at that point are living to be 130 or whatever, you're not really motivated to necessarily get on your real path and give it your all, because I got 100 years to go. Okay. But if you know already that you've only got 50, especially if you are 50 and you've only got maybe 20 or 30 left, there is a built-in motivation to want to, okay, I really better do what I was designed to do. I really better start hustling. And I think there is some wisdom in that. I think that number of years that we know that we have left, I think is meant to motivate us to say, and not to mention the fact that it also could be gone tomorrow. I mean, cancer could come and take me in 2 weeks if that's the way it's meant. So boy, I better get on that horse and start riding, because you don't, tomorrow isn't promised, so maybe that's part of the wisdom there, that trees and plants don't have that reality. I mean, I know you said they have a brain that's a different kind of a brain, but they don't have the brain to think about their own demise. And I
Well, in
think
the
maybe
nature,
that's
I would say trees and plants, and they have their own rhythm of life given by God. They don't apply their own mind, the body-centered mind, so to say. But in human being, there's a constant conflict in the personal self and the rhythm of the life given by God. So there's a dilemma, I think. So too
yeah.
much of your own intuition you have to put in, or you just intuitively do what life has given you and then just carry on.
So basically, two things fundamentally. When you realize you are sent here temporarily to add value, and death is not define you. Basically, you are going home after death. So now, whenever that realization happens to you, that I'm here only to add the highest value, then basically whatever life is left for you, you basically realign everything to add the highest value, rather than worrying about I did not and I wasted my life and what do I do, because in remorse you are wasting more time. Basically, what we have to do is whatever is left, we have to add more value. And basically, there is another understanding that call to come back can happen any day. So although we are anticipating a 20-year left or 30-year left, but that is erroneous, because I can go tomorrow for whatever reason. So I have to focus on today to add the higher value. I cannot wait for tomorrow. So there is a urgency in in conducting yourself in adding the highest value.
Who else would like to share a thought?
So it's a question for Ratanjit ji. So, I mean, I personally wholeheartedly, agree with you about, this concept of adding the highest value. But when we're talking to people, how do we convince them? Because if this were that easy, then most people would be doing it. The reality is that most people do not do it. And so that is where
Basically, in all my lectures and workshops and all that, one question always was asked at the end. So how do I change this person? How do I change my children? How do I put them into value adding this? Or basically, you have only control on yourself. You do not control anybody.
right.
So when you want to change others to add value, you can only become an example to add the highest value. So you basically focus on your life and yourself to add value and don't worry about changing the world.
I understand that. But once again, I'm just, if you look at our world, for example, 200 years ago versus now, are we better off? I would argue we are not, despite all this so-called advancement. The quality of human life is not better; it's worse. So, at some point, we have to ask that question. That if we are truly interested in improving the quality of life for humanity as a whole, we should and we ought to ask that question, in my opinion, that
No,
how that can be accomplished.
now if you want to change the world and if you want to start the procedure to change the world, so we have only 30, 40, 50 years of life, and I can only start a mechanism to change the world. And that mechanism can survive and can eventually change the world. The one thing good is that we all die. So all these noisemakers and people who have bad perspective are going to go away. So new generation is going to come. A new generation, when a child is born, it's a clean mind. So whatever we give them becomes their software. So we install a software in their brain of their children of oneness to understand, and so it will change the world. So if you start the procedure yourself to change the world, rather than making a product and writing a book or giving lectures, because once you have, we do not live our knowledge, we live our habits. Once those habits are formed, you cannot change them. You have seen many times you attend a lecture, my goodness, it was great. And basically, you talk about it for a week or so, and eventually you recommend to another friend, my goodness, that guy is so great, you should listen to him. But whatever he said, you do not implement correctly in your life.
Well,
So
I mean, some people
ultimately,
do. Some
huh?
people do implement it, not majority do, but some people do.
No, we take a certain portions.
Right.
We do not have the whole concept. It does not transform you. Basically, what benefits you most, it says you eat this apple or this thing, you start eating that basically. So some of those things, we do not change our mindset. We do not change our paradigm.
Well, I think that, some people do if they're adequately motivated. It depends on the level of motivation. Yes, majority of people don't. I agree with that part. But, I have difficulty accepting that nobody does because people do change.
They change, but only small portion. They do not.
Well,
There is a wisdom which says all the difficulty given to us are equivalent to a medicine. All the comfort given to us are equivalent to a poison. Think about it. Because it's only in the difficulties we think of changing ourselves.
Mhm. Yeah, that is the motivation part I'm talking
That's the
about.
motivation part.
Right.
So,
So if somebody is
so
adequately
nature
motivated,
has
like,
put us in the cycle of good and bad, but
Yeah.
we waste all our difficulties in worrying about why me and praying and this and that. We do not utilize those things to change ourselves, change our environment.
Mhm.
We
Yeah.
should be, first of all, grateful anytime we are subjected into difficulty because this has given us opportunity to change.
Right. Right. So, yeah, well, we can talk more about that, but I don't want to monopolize the time. So let other people talk.
We haven't heard from Sahil today.
Hi, Dada. Hi, Ray.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. What do you think?
Hi. Apologies, I was interrupted by a phone call. I was talking to my father, but I could hear the remainder of the session, and I pretty much understood everything and absorbed everything pretty well. And so I wouldn't be troubling you with any questions today. But during midweek, there's a quote of yours, Dada, that I read on one of my notepads, and it said, "Unconditional loving, serving, and giving are the best ways to enrich your life." And I found that to be a really beautiful quote. So I just want to thank you for writing it on this notepad of yours. And that really helped. That really made my day after reading that. That really ignited a fire within me. Thank you.